Welcome to this first video that helps to explain how to run a study within VetCompass. This first session will cover the planning, the background for your study. My name is Dan O'Neill. I'm one of the epidemiology team within VetCompass at the Royal Veterinary College. VetCompass is a program that collects data from primary care and now referral veterinary practices on a wide range of companion animal, farm and equine species. So, you're planning on doing a study within VetCompass. What is it that you need to do to get this study underway? Well, one of the first things to consider is how your study can offer a welfare gain for the animal species under study. This is a de facto requirement for all studies within VetCompass. They must have a stated welfare gain written out clearly in advance. Once you've gone through this step, you need to consider ethics approval. All VetCompass studies must have formal ethics approval before they can commence. It is then really important to consider the supervisory team for your study. You may be one of the supervisors, or you may be a student or a researcher working under a supervisory team. These studies are multidisciplinary. In other words, most VetCompass studies are at heart epidemiology studies that deal with big data, that need to have an application of the big data for some welfare gain or to answer some research question. So that means that the best supervisory teams will contain members from a great number of different disciplines. The next step to consider for your study is funding. This may be direct financial funding, or it may be funding by providing expertise, but it is really important to ensure that this is in place right from the outset. Funding might be external funding from an external source, such as one of the large charities, or it may come directly from your university. Once all of this is in place, it is then important to start the formal process of getting access to vetcompass.org. Vetcompass.org is available online, but there are a large number of firewalls to protect the data available within the VetCompass server. So you need to contact one of the VetCompass team with your information on welfare gain, on your plan for ethics, on your supervisory team, and on your funding. And then once your study is authorized by the VetCompass team, then we can start to set up access. Once the website, vetcompass.org, has allowed access to you, you then need to have your study set up. We will go through this in a future video, but this means setting up a denominator population. These are the animals that your study will explore. Once that is done, you then need to set up your study questions. So what questions will you ask of the data? This latter part leads us into the second section of this video, which is about study design. It is really important that you have a well-developed study design. And this goes far beyond just thinking, I know what my research question is. Study design is a very serious part of the initial setup of any VetCompass study. So just to expand a little bit on study design, what does this entail and require? Well, first of all, once again, you need to consider your welfare plan, and you need to be able to write this out clearly with clearly stated welfare outcomes that you envisage from your study and how these can be applied to improve animal welfare. You then need to clearly state your research topic, your research question, and your hypothesis. So for example, your research topic might be oral hematoma in dogs. So that is a very general topic. Your research question might be, what is the prevalence and what are the risk factors for oral hematoma? So we're now zooming in a little bit more. And then your research hypothesis might be, dogs with allergic skin disease have a higher odds of oral hematoma than dogs that do not have allergic skin disease. So we are now delving much deeper into the research question and the research topic. It is very important that these are able to be written out clearly. Much of the time we carry this information in our head and we think we understand it, but when we're forced to write it out, this often highlights areas where we need to work a little bit more on. You then need to define clearly your aims and objectives. The aims are the very broad aims of the study, and then the objectives are specific, and these should really follow the acronym, the SMART objectives. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. So objectives are very specific, whereas aims can be much more general. A key part of any study design is assigning and setting up definitions. When we say a word such as oral hematoma, that may mean different things to different people. They may have their own internal definition for oral hematoma. When it comes to epidemiology, it is not good enough for all of us to have our own internal definitions. The study needs to have its definition. It needs to be very clear, very explicit, and it needs to be obvious from the clinical records of any one animal, whether that animal is a case or not a case. Similarly, we need to define any other terms that are used within the study. So for example, we might ask a question whether an animal had an anesthetic used. Well, that again seems acceptable, but when we delve into it, does that mean a local anesthetic, a general anesthetic? Does sedation count as anesthesia? So we need to very clearly define any terms that we use within the study design. We next need to consider numerator and denominator populations. The numerator are the animals that are cases, and the denominator are the animals that are in the overall study. So that will include cases and non-cases. So we need to define what these are. We need to be very careful with timings. So for example, if I say I'm interested in the prevalence of oral hematoma, or if I say I am interested in the prevalence of oral hematoma within 2016. On the face of it, these might seem very similar, but the former, just the prevalence of oral hematoma, includes dogs that get oral hematoma at any point in their life and at any date in the calendar. So this is likely to be a much higher prevalence than if I just state I want the prevalence within 2016. In a lot of clinical papers, this isn't clearly specified, so it leads to some confusion when the results are reported. So reporting the timings is very important. Generally, we're searching for animals that are cases within our overall denominator. To do this, we need to define search terms. So if our topic was oral hematoma, we might well be searching for animals using search terms such as oral or hematoma. Or we might trim off the last few letters from some of these words and add a wildcard, an asterisk. These terms need to be defined and then trialed in some pilot studies until we get to a set of terms that we think are going to capture as many as possible of the true cases, but also exclude as many as possible of the non-cases. And then finally, the most important and actually the most interesting bit, we need to set up our patient and problem data questions. So this is the questions we're actually going to ask of our data. And we define them at two hierarchies. The patient level questions refer to questions about the animal in general. So was this animal included in the study? Did the animal die during the study? So these refer to the animal in general. The problem questions relate to the specific disorder or problem within the animal. So again, thinking about a topic that might be oral hematoma in dogs, a problem question might be the date of first diagnosis, or did the animal receive medical treatment for the oral hematoma? So we need to define these two questions, the patient questions and the problem questions, and lay these out in a very clear way such that we can set them up within our study. And then the final thing, and I cannot emphasize this too much, is to please think, and then think a little bit more, and spend some weeks or months working up your study design and planning your study. It is just all too easy to ask your supervisors, what do I do? Tell me what to do. Well, this isn't really how the best research works. The best research is a process of developing new and innovative thinking. And that is how discovery is made. We think we know the world, but then once we think about the world, we'll see that the world changes. And the same happens in research. So I would strongly encourage you to plan and think and consider and read widely and talk to many people, and then bring in all of that new knowledge into your own thinking and make this research project really something that you own, you control, and that you are designing. So with that, that is the end of our general introduction to planning and setting up a VetCompass study. Once we get on to the next stage, we will actually access the VetCompass database and start to do a study, start to play with the data. We do this by accessing the database at vetcompass.org, but that's one for a future video. Obviously, the VetCompass team is a very large team. These are some of the key players within this team. Professor Dave Broadbelt and Professor David Church are part of the key leadership team. So without this large background team supporting the entire project, VetCompass would not be as successful as it is. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking with you in a future video. This is Dan O'Neill signing out.